Thanks for joining me today. Jupyter notebooks have pretty much become the standard for data science and data analytics teams. However, there is still a number of pain points when it comes to working with them, and today I will explain how we tackle these problems in Datalore, which is the data science notebook platform we built at JetBrai. It is available in cloud and enterprise setups. But first, let me quickly introduce myself. Thanks for the organizers who already did it, but I just wanted to add that I do product marketing for Datalore, and I graduated as a data scientist, and generally, I'm passionate about marketing and tech. And for the last 5 years, I've been a heavy user of Jupyter notebooks. And Jupyter has a really great community, and is probably one of the most successful open source projects ever. Many tools are in fact built using Jupyter technology, and Datalore is not an exception here. However, classic Jupyter or Jupyter notebooks, as well as many solutions built upon it, aren't free from the inherent problems. And first, let's talk about setting up environments. When you start working on a computational notebook, you normally begin by setting up your work environments and installing all the packages you might need. And there are two very different ways how you can do so in a traditional notebook. On the one hand, you can just install most of the packages using simple pip magics. But the problem with that is when you install a package using pip, it will affect the environment for all of the notebooks on that machine. And installing a package for one notebook might break your other notebooks that have been functioning before. There is another way how you can deal with installing dependencies and managing them, and that's by creating custom Docker images. So with Docker, you can create fully reproducible environments, and that's totally fine, but it requires a lot of additional efforts and time. Wouldn't it be great if you could dynamically change your environment, but at the same time keep the notebook environment isolated and reproducible? And basically that was the motivation for us, JetBrai, when building Environment Manager in Datalore. So when you start working on a notebook in Datalore, you begin with a pre-configured based environment. And on top of that, you can start installing any additional libraries that you might need. So using the Environment Manager, you can search for any package or any library, choose its version, and install it from the editor UI. All the changes that you make to your environment are kept isolated to a specific notebook, and are saved to an environment file that could be further copied to other notebooks that you might have, or you can use a notebook as a template and then clone it to reproduce the same environment for other notebooks. Now let's talk about getting data from multiple data providers. So in traditional notebooks, it might be hard to understand if a certain data file, a certain CSV file, if it belongs to one notebook or to several notebooks. You might follow certain conventions, but to be honest, it might become a mess quite soon. So in Datalore, we solved this problem by attaching the files to the notebook. So your workspace, where you store the notebooks, it stays clean, and you always know which notebook a file belongs to. If you want to share one file, it might be a huge data set between multiple notebooks, you can upload it to workspace files. And second, if you ever worked, or if you are working with any external data sources, there might be a lot of time spent on context switching between the place where you retrieve your data, for example, an SQL IDE, and the place where you do your final research. And again, that might require a lot of time, a lot of reproducing of different queries and different places, and eventually might make your work not reproducible. To solve this in Datalore, we added an ability to connect databases right to your notebooks. So you can connect a lot of SQL databases right from the editor UI and then reuse these connections across the other notebooks without having to write a single line of Python code. When you connect a database, you will see the database schema, so you'll be able to navigate it, and then you can create SQL cells with native SQL right inside your Python notebooks. And when writing SQL code, you'll get code completion, you'll get syntax highlighting. By the way, you'll also get code completion for the table, columns, names, not only for SQL functions. And when your query was executed, after your query is executed, the result would be automatically saved to a pandas data frame so that you could seamlessly continue working on it inside your Python code. One more important thing here, when you connect to a database, you need your credentials. And with our database integration, the credentials are stored in a specific authentication server, so by no means they could be retrieved in the environment by other people. Now let's talk about writing code without IDE support. When you are writing code in a professional Python IDE, such as, for example, PyCharm, you might be familiar with this tool by JetBrai. So you will get code compilation, you will get documentation on hover, quick fixes, refactorings, and all of those fancy features available for Python developers in an IDE. In traditional notebooks, you get less. You get just a plain worksheet. You might just add some plugins that will be giving you coding assistance, but probably that could not compare to a professional IDE. You can quite often see people switching between an IDE and a Jupyter notebook, or between Stack Overflow and Jupyter notebooks. To fix this problem in Datalore, we made an IDE a part of our solution. So I've mentioned a bunch of cool features such as code completion, contextual documentation, quick fixes, refactorings, and you get everything that you are familiar with in PyCharm and Datalore as well. For SQL, we also reused a lot of code from another JetBrai IDE called DataGrip, and also made it available in Datalore for working with SQL databases. Not all the inspections and refactorings are available in Datalore that you might be familiar with in PyCharm, but we are working on it. And for example, you can already rename a function or method in our notebooks. That might sound super simple, but to do this correctly, you need to do the full syntax analysis of your code. Another pain point of data science and data analysis teams is probably sharing their work. Quite often, people share their notebooks as files via messengers or via email. But what if you need to share a huge data set alongside with your notebook? Some people use Git, but it doesn't work really well with uploading big data sets and sharing them through Git. So data scientists end up storing their data in one place and their research in another place. If you share your notebook as a zip archive and send it over to your colleagues or to your teammates, they will spend time on installing the same environment you had in your Jupyter notebook, or in your Jupyter notebook, and they will need to fix potential issues with file paths. So again, it requires a lot of time and effort. And in some cases, you might need to share your work with external people, with some of your stakeholders for whom your code might be intimidating, and you just don't want to share hundreds of lines of intermediate steps to only share the final, 5 or 7 cells. So that's another part of collaboration. And in Datalore, we we see several ways of how people collaborate in their data science and data analysis workflow. The first one is when you need some help from your colleagues on the same piece of code, when you just basically want to work on the same notebook. The second collaboration way is when you work on a project that consists of multiple notebooks, multiple data sets, multiple work artifacts. And the third way, as I mentioned before, is like sharing your work, sharing results of your work externally. For the first two workflows, we've integrated real-time collaboration to notebooks in Datalore. And it works exactly like Google Docs. So you can just share a link with either view or edit access rights to your colleagues or team members, and they will be able to hop on the same notebook with you. And the great thing about it is that you don't need to share anything additionally because the environment and the data is shared automatically, and you're basically sharing the same computation state. So you will see your collaborator's cursors. You can track your collaborator throughout the notebook, and this way you can help each other out on some data science problems, and move faster, so to say, with collaboration. We also have shared workspaces for team projects where you need to share the workspace with your colleagues only once, and then everyone has access to the notebooks, to the up-to-date state of your projects without having to commit any changes to any repositories. So you always get up-to-date state of your work. And for the last use case that I've mentioned, for sharing results of your work, we also made available turning your notebooks into interactive reports. So what you can do in Datalore, you can hide intermediate steps. You can just basically hide the code cells. You can hide even some outputs. And then just hit one button, like publish. You can add interactive controls to make your reports look interactive. And then just send a link over to your stakeholders. And they will be opening it just in their browsers. No Datalore account is required. And they'll be able to manipulate the controls, get their own version, get their own copy, and without any overwhelming feelings about your code, they will be able to get the notebook that you've prepared recomputed on them on demand. Last but not least, let's talk about reproducibility. I think this problem is familiar to everyone who has ever worked with Jupyter notebooks, even though we normally read documents from top to bottom. In Jupyter, it might easily become a mess. On the one hand, it's good because you might find that you've made a mistake in the first cell, or you need to add a new intermediate step, and you can easily do it within Jupyter. But on the other hand, it's a constant source of trouble, because you might execute one cell multiple times. You might just completely delete a cell. You might move the cells up and down, and it might result to your work not being reproducible at all. To mitigate this, what you need to do is to restart the kernel and rerun the computations from top to bottom. Just rerunning the computations from top to bottom won't help, because the side effects will still be there in your code. For example, you've declared a variable a equals 2, and then you deleted the cell. But the state will still know that there is a variable a equals 2. But if another person wants to just reproduce the results you had, it won't work. So in Datalore, we've been working for the last 3 years to mitigate this problem. And half a year ago, we released the new reactive mode that basically helps to keep your notebook state in a consistent order. So what it does, it enforces top-down recalculation of the cells below the modified ones. It's not just that simple, rerun all from the modified one. Underneath, it's using the framework called CREO. It's checkpoint, restore, and user space framework, which provides a generic way to implement backups and restore functionality for arbitrary running Linux applications, and is also used by Docker, among others. So what is cool about the new approach is that it's language agnostic and works out of the box for all of the Jupyter kernels available in Datalore. And basically, with reactive modes, you can be sure that your computation state is always consistent and that your work is always reproducible. And this is, I think, is the crucial thing for people in academia and people in business when their whole career or when their whole business might be just challenged by a trivial mistake in a Jupyter notebook done by a data scientist. So that's it for me today. If you were interested in any of the features that I've mentioned during my talk, I welcome you to our JetBrai booth on the second floor, and I will be conducting demos. I will be conducting live demos of Datalore, and I'll be showing these features that I've talked about in depth. So I will do these demos 2 times today during the coffee breaks, one at 2:20 p.m. and another one at 3:50. So please join us, and yeah, thanks again for joining me for this talk, and any questions are welcome.
Thank you for the talk. It was really amazing. Now we have really 10-15 minutes for questions. I will first read the online ones, and then I will ask the room if they have any questions. So why didn't you add this functionality you presented directly to the Jupyter project?
Like the architecture we have in Datalore is a bit different from the one in Jupyter, and to fully realize the potential of Datalore, we started building this tool internally in JetBrai.
Thank you. Is Datalore web-based or standalone application?
So we have a bunch of options how you can use Datalore. We have Datalore Community and Datalore Pro plans, which are hosted by JetBrai, and you can just use it in our cloud by registering via email. And we also offer self-hosted versions of Datalore, like a private installation of Datalore for companies that you can install on any Kubernetes cluster, like AWS, Azure, GCP accounts, or even on on-prem servers. So both options are available.
Thank you. Does this follow the standard notebook format? Is it possible to export the notebook and environment to run it independently of Datalore?
Yes, so we are Jupyter compatible, so you can import Jupyter notebooks and export notebooks in Datalore via Jupyter format.
Thank you. How does this compare with the Reproducibility and Jupyter Hub setup with a Jupyter Lab IDE?
So in Datalore, we try to focus on the workflow when, like from fetching the data to presenting final results of data scientist work, and we want to empower teams' collaboration, and we would say that we make this path as smooth as possible without having to configure anything. It's just super easy in the product, and the product is tailored for these use cases.
Thank you. Is there an advantage of the inbuilt dependency management over simple virtual environment, or is that what's effectively happening under the hood?
That's a good question. When I was when I studied data science and I created multiple virtual environments, it was always hard for me to manage them. Like, I didn't have a visual representation of them, and I always messed up creating my notebooks in different virtual environments. And I see that it's super transparent when you can just see the environment in the editor UI, and you have full control over it. And the fact that the notebook environment is isolated prevents the whole service from crashing. For example, it might be the problem for companies that host their Jupyter Hub instances, and one person just installs a package in the team, and or just updates the dependencies, and it ruins the whole team's work. So I feel that the fact that the environment is isolated is a huge pro, and being able to see what is there running in your notebook and being able to upgrade with a single click is super helpful.
Thank you. 2 more. Is a part of Datalore included in PyCharm Professional?
No, so these products are separate products because, first of all, Datalore runs in the web. But yeah, I've mentioned that a part of PyCharm is part of Datalore. So, for example, we've integrated coding assistance from PyCharm, and it's running in the backend of Datalore. But yeah, Datalore runs in the web, and PyCharm is an IDE that is installed locally on computers.
Thank you. Does it work with JS visualization, for instance, with Seaborn?
Yes, sure. We Datalore is Jupyter compatible, and it supports all the packages that are available in Jupyter. So we support I would say most of the visualization packages available, also the interactive ones for sure. And on top of that, we also have chart cells. It's a specific type of cell where you can build charts with a few mouse clicks. I can show it during my live demo at the booth. So yeah, we support both Python packages for visualization. We also, by the way, support R. I haven't mentioned that. We also have R, Kotlin, and Scala notebooks. So we support classic packages and have some internal visualization tools as well.
Thank you. While you're answering, I already got 2 more questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer.
Do people use Datalore notebooks to run data science in production systems? Do you recommend doing so?
Yeah, so I would say that the companies that are purchasing the enterprise version of Datalore are using this in production, so that's their main use case. So yeah.
Okay. Is the real-time collaboration using the Jupyter Lab and YGS ecosystem?
Could you repeat it?
Yes.
Sorry.
Is the real-time collaboration using the Jupyter Lab and YGS ecosystem?
No, at the back end, as far as I understand, it has the same mechanism as Google Docs. So it's technology is called something like operational transformation. So it's not using Jupyter Lab by any means at the back end for collaboration.
Thank you. These were the online questions. Does anybody have questions in the room? Yes. Okay.
Thank you. That was an amazing presentation.
Thank you.
I have a more general question. How do you see Datalore and JetBrai engage with the larger Jupyter community in ways that could benefit the entire Jupyter user and developer community?
So first of all, we've been developing approaches to reproducibility for a long time. Just to be honest, when we just started Datalore, there was no Jupyter kernel, and there was only the so-called Datalore kernel available. So we started with trying to fight with the problem of Jupyter notebooks or notebooks, computational notebooks in generally, lacking reproducibility, and we've tried multiple approach on reproducible kernels. And we think that we have found the approach that could work for most of the cases. That's basically the reactive mode that I've talked a bit during my talk. And for this project, when we are ready to share, when we are ready to open source it, I think we'll do this. So this way, we'll open source, I hope at some point, this reactive kernel also to the Jupyter community. Because I think it's I love Jupyter notebooks. I'm a huge fan of Jupyter notebooks, and I know that there are a lot of people who hate Jupyter notebooks. And I think there were talks at PyCon at some point when people said that they hate the Jupyter notebooks. And I think that if we fight together, I mean, as a community, the problem of reproducibility in Jupyter notebooks, it could be treated even more seriously in the data science world, and the whole community would benefit from it.
Thank you. Any more questions in the room? All right. Thank you for the question. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you. So I saw that you can export notebooks for people externally to view them. Is it also possible to export interactive cells with PyWidgets?
Yes, definitely. We support IPython widgets. We don't call it export, we call it publish, because exporting is like exporting a file. This like interactive reports, they are available via a link. But yeah, we support IPython widgets. You can use either them, for example, or you can use the native interactive controls that we've built in Datalore. So that's possible.
Thanks.
Any more questions? No? Okay. Thank you for the questions and thank you for the talk.
Yeah, thank you very much.